All right. So this one, we're talking about test sets and why we do them. I think I've had this kind of in the back of my head for a few years now. Cliff and I were talking about something randomly like 5 or 6 years ago. We were talking about kind of doing some education for coaching, and I think he kind of suggested something like this based off of some stuff he and I were talking about. So a lot of this kind of pertains to swimming, but we also do some stuff with cycling and running that we'll talk about probably a little bit too. So kind of going through the outline, we're going to talk about why all we do them. We have some reasons outside of just athletic reasons, how often we go through them, and then talk about a couple specifically that we do in the water. So why do we do test sets? One big reason is we have a little bit of year-over-year data. We can kind of see, we have some that we specifically do each year and kind of each time of year that we can see, mid-October, kind of what this person looks like and what they looked like as a freshman versus a sophomore versus a junior, and just, hopefully they're getting faster, but if they're not, to talk about why, were we doing something different the last 2 or 3 weeks leading into this? Have we kind of hit a little bit of weakness somewhere? Are we undertraining or overtraining something? So it just kind of gives us something that's a little bit repeatable to look at. This is maybe the biggest reason we do test sets, is it gives us some comparison to previous athletes. We are a weird sport in the fact that, like, their 5K times on a given course may not mean very much. Their swim times out of the water may not mean very much. We don't really have a great way to compare ourselves to previous athletes. So that's one of the biggest reasons that we do this, is just it kind of gives us something that's concrete. We know that, if we're doing 20 by 100s, it's going to be 20 by 100s, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after that. It's the same distance. We can have the same setup. We're going to have the same send-off. And it gives us some connection to, we've had some pretty good swimmers on our team, and they know that, hey, this person, I was never on a team with them, but this person were typically front pack swimmers. And this is what they did. This is what they did in 2018. This is what they did in 2020. And it kind of gives them a way to compare to previous athletes. For me, we are kind of getting through the point now that we've had some graduating classes. We've had girls that I talk about to our team, that I tell stories about, Leah, that all the girls on our team, like none of them were on a team with her at this point. So it does kind of give some connection to some previous athletes that came before them. Helps with goal setting, kind of some intermittent goal setting. This is something they know we do throughout the season. So, instead of just talking about, I want to be able to make the first chase pack in the swim, it's, hey, I know I've got to swim roughly 940 in the broken 800 to do that. So when we do this, that's going to be like an intermittent goal for me, kind of a mid-season goal of, I'm trying to do this at regionals and nationals in the water. So if I want to do this here, a really good step to that is to be able to do this here when we do this goal. So kind of just, again, gives us some concrete, something to stand on of, we know this is going to be an accurate distance. We know what this time means. We know if we're getting better, and we know what that time looks like compared to other athletes. And it helps with some race-induced stress. We take these pretty serious because we don't do them once a week or anything. Like our broken 800 that we're going to go through, we typically do that once a season. So it's something they have a shot once a year to do. That's going to be their time for the year. It's not something we do every week. So like in a normal training week, we typically swim in the mornings. If we're doing a test set though, it's not uncommon for us to kind of flip our schedule a little bit. We'll give them the morning off. We'll come in, they'll put on a suit and get ready to hopefully swim fast. I think it does help it's a lower stress point than us packing up and going to a race, but it does still create some nerves that they have to deal with. We still go through a normal warm up of, hey, we're going to go through 1,500 meters together as a team, and then I'm going to give you guys the next 10 to 15 minutes to warm yourselves up. and kind of do what you like to do. If you want to do some pace work, great. If you prefer to get out of the water and stretch, if you're nervous and you need to go to the bathroom, kind of do what you need to do to get ready to race. Because athletes handle that in kind of a different way. So we really try to, if we're going to record a time for something, if this is going to be something we do once a year, we try to actually kind of create some stress and let them learn how to deal with that. That kind of leads us into how often. We typically do something every 4 to 8 weeks, kind of depending on where we're at in our season. If we have big breaks, we'll kind of work some stuff in there. If we have big breaks between races, but we're not just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I've got like a top 10 list of things that we do kind of annually. That includes most every year, our entire team will run a 1500 on the track, like in a track meet. We usually do a 3K on the track. We try to do a 5K depending on what the race schedule looks like in the spring. We'll do an FTP test a couple of times a year, and we've got 2 or 3 test sets for swimming that we work our way through. So we spread those 4 or 5 things that we do annually kind of out throughout the year. So we're doing something every few weeks, again, assuming we're not in a heavy race schedule. And the swim sets we can work in when we are in a little bit more of a high race schedule. But next point is, however, we usually only do 1 test set, each test set once a year. Every once in a while, we'll do, the broken 800 is a little bit less stressful. We'll sometimes do that twice a year, but most things we do once a year. And that's to create some of those things. I had one athlete that transferred in a few years ago, and something we did was something similar to what she'd done at a different school. And she's like, yeah, but we did ours once a week. And I kind of talked to her about like, okay, well, what did you get from that? And she said, well, you kind of got used to how to swim it, but the downsides to it were you didn't have to take it serious, because if you had an off week, it was, well, we're going to do it again next Tuesday. And it was a little hard to kind of get motivated to do it because it was something that was very strenuous. The times didn't mean quite as much because, well, again, if I mess this one up, I can do another one next week. And I think just mentally it becomes a little taxing to do something that stressful every single week where you're looking at the exact same times. And okay, well, why did I go a half second slower this week versus last week? And it just becomes a little too mental at that point. So yeah, I think doing it too often just takes away from some of the things we're trying to accomplish with it. So some that we actually do, one of our test sets that we keep a running list for is 2100s for best average. I kind of got this off of John Urbanchek, was a guy that coached club for a little while, coached at Michigan for a while, had a lot of good distance swimmers, 200 stroke 4am. And after quite a few years, this was one thing they did to kind of find threshold pace. He would do a test set of 3100s. He found that if he took 3100s on 130, this is short course yards, whatever their average was. So if they, added them all up, divided, and they were holding 102s all the way through, that you could add about a second to that. And it was a pretty good predictor of what their mile pace would be. I can tell you, like, this is something when I was coaching club swim and even when I was coaching swim in college, that we would occasionally do. And if you've got swimmers that are fit, it is a very scary predictor of your mile. It's very, very close. We're not swimming a mile. So we dropped this. I think the first year we did this, we actually did 3100s. And then I kind of decided that was maybe a little too grueling for some of the girls. So we dropped it to 2100s. We currently have been for the last 7 years swimming short course meters here. We just built a new pool and are swimming short course yards now. So we've been doing 2100s at 140 to account for the meters. It's usually taking your average time You add about a second to second and a half to it. And that's a pretty good predictor of race pace for an 800. So like if we do these things to start to formulate what race pace should be. If we're doing race pace work in the pool, what does that mean? Because again, our times from open water, they just really may not mean very much to us. So this year, when we're changing 2 short course yards, we're going to move this back to 2100s on 130. And my guess is it's going to be closer to about 1 second plus their average pace. So this has been our top 10 list over the last few years now. And again, these are meter times. I will say the 2100s, we've had a couple of years where we've skipped this. This is not one. We've done this most years, but I think we had a year or two in there over 7 years that we did not get this in. So these are probably not quite as accurate as our broken eight. The broken eight is something we've gotten in every year. But these are some of our times through this. And again, I think what I kind of like about this is we send these times out, our top 10 list at the beginning of every year. It helps with some goal setting. It helps with, okay, well, I know I can keep up with Chelsea in practice. Chelsea went 111s for these, so I'm going to try to hold 111s. It just kind of helps with some goal settings. And people know that, hey, you know, Ella and Maddie were people that were typically front pack swimmers, and they did a 109 and 110 for these. So that's what I'm going to try to do. Another one we do, and this one we do more of, or have done it every year, is a broken 800. So for the broken 800, we do a 200 from a dive at 4 minutes, 400 from a push at 7 minutes, 100 dive at 2 minutes, and 100 push. We take our times, add it up, and then it's usually about 15 seconds faster than your 800 time. Another thing that I've found with this one that I actually really like for the sport of triathlon is kind of simulates how we race a little bit, or they can use it to simulate how we race a little bit. You know, if they're trying to work on some top end speed to get in a decent position before they hit that first buoy, that 200 from a dive kind of simulates that. They can take out the 200 a little bit faster. We talk about pacing a good bit through this of how fast can you take that 200 out and not completely blow up later in the set. It's kind of the same things when we're racing. Like, you know that you need to take the opening part of the swim out pretty hard to get yourself into a good position. But if you get 500 meters into the race and you're just like, your heart rate's above 200 and you can't breathe anymore, then okay, we may have just sunk your entire race. So this one I actually do think is pretty good comparatively to what we're racing. And it's pretty accurate. So our top 10 through these, I mean, I think, you know, this is Leah's best time. I think Leah's best time that she did in season in short course is about a 9:28. Ella went a 9:15 here and went a 9, I think 35, maybe in her 800. A lot of these are pretty good. What we've also done with this is the races are changing year to year, but typically athletes that have gone somewhere in this range of below a 930 have generally been able to make that like first pack, not the first chase pack, but that first lead out group of 7 to 8 athletes. If you've got enough speed to do this, you typically have enough speed to get in that top group. Historically, what we found is anything under about 10 minutes is good enough to make that first chase pack. And again, this is something that we do every year. We typically do it in kind of mid-October. And that's it. Billy?
I'm just curious. You showed us your top 10 there, but
Mhm.
beyond that, there's probably a lot of athletes there as well. And are
Yeah.
you changing? I'm curious to know what you end up doing as far as changing the pacing, or do you change the pacing and you just say, make it? I'm sorry, the send off.
The
That should be
send
more
offs,
clear.
the
The
send
send
offs
offs.
stay. Yeah, the send offs stay. They stay at whatever that is, 4, 7, 2, and then whatever on the last one. Yeah, those stay year to year. It's the same time. We have gotten into some situations. I mean, obviously, we have some swimmers that aren't quite as strong and they're not getting near as much rest, and that becomes an issue for them. But there also are weaker swimmers in open water, so the times wind up still being pretty predictable compared to what they do. Um,
I would
but
also
yeah,
ask back to your original 20 by 100s because you can potentially have someone who's like upward, getting closer up to that 140 send off. Do you either change that or do you recommend changing that when if some people potentially on this call have athletes that are swimming slower than that?
so what we've done with that in the past is we've recorded the number that they've made. So like the very first year when we did 100s on 140, we had some athletes that couldn't make all of them. So instead of changing the interval, we just kept up with, okay, this person made 15 of them before they missed one. And that was their goal for the next cycle was, hey, I'm going to try to make, 20 of these, or I'm going to try to make however many. So if we're doing a test set, we typically don't change the time send off. But I will say that, I mean, depending on what level of athlete you're working with, if your entire team is going, like if you're trying to go 2100s and your entire team is going to make three of those, okay, well, that doesn't make much sense at that point. So I probably would change it to, hey, can we all make 20 of them on 2 minutes? Can we all make 20 of them on 2:10? And kind of start from there. So you do have to kind of know where your team's at on that. But we've been, I guess, fortunate enough that for the most part, people have been able to make send offs. And in the cases where they haven't, we've just recorded how many they have made.
And to clarify, it's 800 meters
Yeah,
on. Okay.
that's how
And
we've been running it. For if you're having to run yards, and I'll send this out when I send notes out. But I mean, for the hundreds, I would probably take 10 to 15 seconds off of that. So maybe run them on 145 to 150 for the 100s. You're going to take 20 seconds off the 200 probably, and 30 to 40 seconds off of the 400. For those of you that like come from a swim background, racing short course meters to short course yards, typically the 1,000 is the equivalent to the 800. I think even when if we started doing this in yards, we would still do an 800. We're not going to bump this up to 1,000 and work out ways to break that up. I just think doing it as 800 yards is still more equivalent to what we're actually racing in open water as far as the total time. It's going to be a little bit faster, but not drastically. Um, you're just going to want to cut those intervals down a little bit.
you are adding 15 seconds to the overall time to get your predicted, not 15 seconds per hundred, correct?
15 seconds to the overall time. So if we've got somebody that's going to 9:15, what we've found is that adding about 15 seconds, if they go a 9:15 in this, they can usually go around a 9:30 when they do it straight. Um, I think another thing it helps with is you have some kids that just don't sometimes realize how fast they actually can swim if they're not used to distance. They will really try to make sure they pace out an 800 and like, I don't want to blow myself up here. And I think doing something like that helps learn how to pace a little bit better. We've had some athletes that could wind up going some pretty fast times there. And then on the flip side of that, have dropped time in their 800 in the water just because, okay, well, it turns out I actually can go somewhere around that fast. And it kind of helps pacing a little bit better.
Do you have a sense on if your team they like the 20 by 100 or the broken 8 as like they connect more with one of those two test sets?
Everybody likes the broken 800 better. It hurts. It hurts really, really bad, but it's not mentally as daunting as the 2100s. Typically, your athletes that are a little bit more endurance based, slow twitch athletes, they actually tend to do a little bit better in the 2100s. They can just kind of settle into a rhythm a little bit more. Um, Going hard for 2,000 meters isn't that big of a deal for them because they just kind of they get into a rhythm, they get into their pace. Whereas people that are a little bit more fast twitch people that like doing shorter stuff, they tend to really like the broken 800 a lot more than they like the 2100s. Um, I've also found because of that, they wind up giving a slightly better effort for that. Um, I will say one thing about the broken 800, kind of to play off of that. Sometimes with those, again, more fast twitch athletes, they can fake that broken 800 a little bit more. You've got some athletes that will turn out some times that are probably more in the like 20 to 30 seconds faster than they can do an 800 straight versus 15. The ones that are your more endurance based athletes, they are going to be more in that 10 to 15-second range, whereas your kind of fast twitch athletes, they can be dying at the end and still hop up on the blocks and dive a pretty fast 100. They can push a pretty fast 100. They can get out in that 200 and go pretty quick. So some of it's a little bit more athlete to athlete, but they get pretty amped up for the broken 800. That's something they take pretty serious. Stop sharing my screen. Any questions around those test sets, I guess, or just around that in general? I know I talked about we do some different stuff in the run too, and we do some stuff on the bike. Well, if we don't have very much more, we're going to have a little bit of time to kill until that recruiting panel because I don't think Jenny's going to hop on until 1:30.
Perfect time to watch the Breaking Four.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I'm going to stop recording there.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.